AI is coming. We are already in that era, and we need to be aware of the change in intelligence.
How do you develop your unique method to cultivate that creative genius?
It's kind of innate in some people. It's just really letting them know how they work, because we are different. We're all unique. Everybody's going to have a certain sort of, tendency or direction. Like I said, with the one side and the other, the angel and the demon, the one's telling you to go one way, the other's telling you to go another way. It's about getting them together. It's about unifying your mind and your body so that they're a single unit.
Welcome to Mastery Podcast, where we share stories of impact-driven entrepreneurs to create that ripple effects of positivity. I am your host, Dr. Sass, and today we have with us Lillian Skinner. She's the CEO of Gifted Indie. And you're the champion of the Neurodivergent community. And you are very knowledgeable about the savant and all those stuff. And I'm going to ask you some questions about that too. And welcome. Welcome to Mastery Podcast. I'm just so excited to talk to you. I know you're a really fast thinker. And when we talk, I'm like, oh my gosh, this woman is gifted. So now let's, you have this unique approach to individuals who have talents before conventional measures, right? That's why Gifted Indie come in is not just a company. It's a movement that you put in place. But Lillian, you describe yourself as a prodigious savant, right? That's how you say it. Can you explain to our viewer? I literally, honest to God, I was like, what does she mean, savant? I went and Google and just educate myself on this terminology. Can you explain to our viewer what that means?
Sure. The way I see savantism is a little different than most. In the past, we've seen savantism as cognitive mostly only. But then Dr. Temple Grandin came along and they gave her the label of savant. Most people see it as idiot savant, which I find very offensive because it is about people who have very high giftedness and then also very low disability. I come from a family of people that do not have that. We are prodigious savants, but it doesn't manifest because each of the savants that we recognize in our system are people who didn't go to school in the public school system. They didn't get put into the system until they were older, possibly high school or older. But I went through the high school system. I went through the middle school. I went through the elementary. I went through public education in America. So did my entire family. And I watched my sister, particularly, she's a music savant. I watched her destroyed in the system. I watched her be stripped of her ability to believe in herself. And this is a little girl who at 1 year old could hear a song once and sing it to you. And at 2 years old could sing the harmonies to it. So obviously we had incredible talent, and that when she got into the system, she picked up multiple instruments. When they realized she wasn't reading the music, but just playing by ear, they shamed her and she quit, which is the exact same thing that happened to my father. I had family members who were math savants go through, and they got scholarships to college. And then when they got there, they put them in an institution because they were doing math with their emotions. I have a math savant daughter, and when she went to school, she was testing into 18th grade in math at 10, and they said that she was disabled. I was like, I don't really know that I can even be on the same page with this, because that's not what I knew it to be. So when I talked to Dr. Linda Silverman, who is a profoundly gifted researcher, because my kids were testing as profoundly gifted, she told me that there's one called an emotion savant. I was like, oh, that's what I am, because I had been looking for it and we just didn't have it in the literature. It just didn't exist. So basically my whole role has been trying to help people see that we have many savants, but they've probably gone through the public school system and they've probably been destroyed, because savantism is somatic first. You learn immersively. We do this as babies, we do this as toddlers, but then when we get to the school system, they have Cartesian dualism, they split it apart. You're taught one subject at a time, and the most gifted need context. They need it integrated. They need to see it in real life. My daughter, who was in college and, just skipped high school and went to college, she struggles with geometry, just like Dr. Temple Grandin does, but my daughter doesn't have any deficiency whatsoever. The problem is that it doesn't have enough context. It's flat, it's on a sheet, and she sees triangles as dimensional, So with AI, I've been able to create somatic learning for her so that she can actually learn how to build a house and learn all the theory of geometry while doing that. It's really beautiful because we're finally rolling into an era where it's not that 2D perspective, which is what Dr. Linda Silverman talks about. She talks about how our systems teach us in 2D, but that's not real life, right? That's just memorization and regurgitation. And those of us who are prodigious savants, those of us who are talent savants, we have a natural inclination. We're learning it immersively. It comes up through our body and we realize it cognitively, which is actually something that I have gone on to write papers on. It's called infracognition, and it's the mirror of metacognition. And this is what I'm trying to get across, is that AI is coming. We are already in that era, and we need to be aware of the change in intelligence. The focus on cognitive as the be-all end-all of giftedness is over. It's already over. And in order for us to adjust and move into the next era and thrive, we have to be above what AI is. That's more than cognitive, which we all naturally are. We're born more than cognitive. We're born somatic and cognitive integrated. That's your creative intelligence, your full intelligence. So what I'm doing is trying to show you how, as a savant, I move through the world, which is as sensitive as a person can be, but fully aware, integrating those sensory information up in real time and using it to move through the world. I've always been about 10 years ahead on what the next trends are coming. With the change coming, I expect that to shrink so that I'm maybe only a year. Maybe then people will start to listen to me, because when you're 10 years ahead, they think you're crazy. But when you're 1 year ahead, you're a savior. So I have been waiting for this time. I've been seeing it for a while. For 20 years, I was in IT. I did emerging tech. I did system security. My degree was in information systems. I came out early, 2000, and was rolled right into that. It was fun. It was new. But then it got old because it was not as new anymore. And then I was I moved into emerging tech. And then now I've moved into intelligence, because system security, systems emerging tech, it's actually very similar in intelligence as human intelligence. We just haven't looked at it that way. So in a way, I'm ahead of human intelligence right now because I've been using it for AI. So it's fascinating. I mean, I knew this actually when I went into college. I was struggling to fit into psychology because the psychology was so not the way I moved through the world. And I'm like, who moves through the world like this? At the time, I didn't know I was a savant. I knew that I was different, but I didn't know that I was all that stuff I had, other people didn't. So I just thought they were gaslighting us. I found out later, other people actually moved through the world the way they were talking. Now I understand I have unified intelligence, that this is typical for savants, but I actually can teach it to other people. I can get them to integrate their intelligence. We can roll back the system's damage, be whole again, and it is also healing. So really what I do is restore you.
Nice. Can I come to your class?
Yeah, you totally can. I'll give you private ones. You're my favorite.
That sounds just awesome. It's and I believe it. And my kids went to the public school also, and they suffer the same thing. I just see their creativity get crushed, and many young adults, many children nowadays have that happen to them, and I'm glad you have this Gifted ND. And you also have a podcast.
Yeah, I have two podcasts. I have the Gifted Neurodivergent podcast, which is my adult one, and I have up 50 podcasts up there where I just talk about what it's like to move through the world, kind of gaslit, and be sure that you're different, sure that you're not crazy, that something's going on here. I talk about struggling to read the directions. I talk about testing poorly and being I don't understand. How can I get a 90 on one test and a 70 on the next, and prepare it exact the same way? But it boils down to the fact that I need complexity, and all of the ways we move through the world, it's the opposite of complex. They're constantly making it simpler. And so I'm struggling. My anxiety's coming up, and literally my anxiety says to me, focus, you need more information. Let's find it. Yeah. But all it is a line or two, and I needed more. And I wasn't allowed to ask, because you're not allowed to ask for more. They'll give you more time so you can sit there and be more anxious, but you're not actually getting your needs met. You're not learning. If I wasn't reading under my desk secretly, I would have probably not learned a darn thing. Yeah. Instead, I read the libraries of every place I ever went to, the entire library.
Wow.
I was bored.
Can you Tell us a little bit about your personal, I know we touched on that a little bit, but what personal experience shaped your understanding of intelligence and creativity?
Well, creativity for me is sort of not an option. I know that I've always been pulled to create. When they gave me things to create, I was like, this is not what I want to do. I didn't want to use the steps they wanted. I wanted to figure out other ways to do it. I wanted to make it more complex. They were constantly giving you these constraints on time, which I was like, I don't really want to have to worry about time. I really want to figure out how I could do this better or more amazing or more efficient. I just don't want to do it the way you're making me do it. They do a lot more steps than my brain needs. I'm a top-down thinker. So for me, I can start with the theory and sort of auto-populate based on similar experiences. So I struggled with sheer boredom, but also exhaustion because they were making me constantly move up in this manner that my brain was like, I don't understand why we're doing it this way. Now they have something called nonlinear thinking, which it's the way they describe creative thinkers. It's not truly nonlinear because you couldn't even tie your own shoelaces if you couldn't do like multiple steps in a row. So it's nonlinear in that you can jump between like many contexts. I call it triangle learning because we need like at least a triangle of points in order for us to sort of memorize it and attach it to others. But because we need that triangle, because we need multiple contexts for it, in order for it to sort of settle into our subconscious, we can jump all those places. So we're constantly seeing something. And even with infracognition, I was asking myself, what is, like when I'm having my internal dialogue, it's between two different intelligences and they will figure it out and send me one way or the other. And I'm like, well, what's that other one? I mean, we know that there's like that angel and demon thing on your shoulder. What's the one? If one's metacognition, what's the other? There wasn't another. So I went and figured out what it was. I wrote papers on it. I figured out the science for it. I mean, it wasn't very hard because in my head, it was so clear. I could see all the steps. I knew the difference between my instinct, my intuition, and beyond. I knew when I was pulling up my actual patterns that I had developed. I knew when it was absolutely sure that this pattern was done and the result was known and I needed to cut that out or go full into it. It's fascinating to me that everyone else doesn't have it, but I think they do. I think we've just been told we didn't to the point where we believe it. And I'm not a believer of things unless my body's like, yes, I'm bored. We have, just like that triangle learning, we sort of have like a triangle sort of knowing. So my head will say, yeah, I learned this. And my body will say, yeah, and we proved it in the real life. And together it's like, yes, we know this is true. But if only one is saying it, I'm like, I don't know. I'm still going to question that. So we talk about cognitive bias. I don't have just cognitive bias because my body's like, no, we got to prove that's true. And then my body sometimes will say, we think it's this way. And then my brain will go, okay, well, let's figure it out. We'll research. AI is so nice because I can just put in a few keywords. And then it will like connect me to all the questions I have in all the different areas. And the silos are broken down. AI is going to break down the silos so that we have big picture genius back, so that we have savants who didn't know they were savants back. We are missing at least 500 million people, I think, in the world that are savants because of the way the somatic oppression of the schools, the way they keep us from knowing immersively. We're also missing a lot of people who would be great at foresight because we need to know spatial giftedness. We need to be spatially able to model. And you cannot do that unless you're using your somatic and your cognitive together because it is together an integrated knowledge that you create and you model.
Nice. That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. I have a lot of stuff in my head.
Thank you for explaining that. How do you develop your unique method to cultivate that creative genius?
It's kind of innate in some people. It's just really letting them know how they work because we are different. We're all unique. Everybody's going to have a certain sort of tendency or direction. Like I said, with the one side and the other, the angel and the demon, the one's telling you to go one way, the other's telling you to go another way. It's about getting them together. It's about unifying your mind and your body so that they're a single unit. Socrates talked about it. He called it the spiritual when they unify. Jung talked about it. Carl Jung talked about it. He had the collective conscious. For me, the clarity is super high. I'm going to guess it's because I'm a woman. And when you're a woman and you have a baby, you are so aware of your infracognition. It is huge. Women were the first to create the Enlightenment era. It was women because they had that extra information from going through childbirth, from going through that experience. And I'm speaking, of course, of biological women, because we have men now that can do that. But what I think is really important is that Enlightenment era erased those women. They got rid of the fact that it was started by women, and then men took it over, and then they proceeded to undo what the women had brought forth. Socrates felt so strongly about it, he was willing to drink hemlock over it, rather than quit teaching his students the whole full integration of their mind, their body, and the spiritual. So I'm not introducing anything mind-blowing, just that I have the cognitive ability to realize my process in my body because I'm so sensitive. And all I'm doing is saying, here, your sensitivity is a good thing. Stop suppressing it, start opening up, start embracing it, because in that is the gift that's going to make you successful in the next era with AI. There's so much change coming. We are the people who will be able to handle it and get in front of it.
What do you think going to happen with the AI if we not taking care of the savants?
I think that AI is going to put a lot of people out of business, and they're going to get very angry at the creatives. I really do fear that. I think that the creatives need to be cultivated. I think everyone has creativity. I think we strip it, but the people that don't have, they aren't stripped of it. They're going to have to open it back up. I mean, it is really, really hard to embrace your creativity. It works against you. There's so many levels of it. There's so much levels of your sensitivity, and it's never going to be uniform, but that's what AI wants. AI is the uniform. The next constant in the world needs to be you. You need to know yourself. That's going to be the constant. Everything else is going to change. AI is going to be constantly changing. Their data is going to be old because the change outside from the ecology and just the environment as a whole. And I mean, even right now, the fact that I could publish a paper and get this information out there as an outsider who's not in a university system is already showing you the change is coming. There's going to be so many more people like me coming out now, and I'll be happy to Sherpa them.
Yeah, nice. Just to give a context, there's more, like you alluded to earlier, there's more than, like, there's different type of savant, right? When the movie Rain Man come out, that's also a type of like creativity, right? People were introduced to, like, how can he do this math in his head so fast?
Well, like you said, I'm fast. So I see it as big picture and small picture. Mm-hmm. We have like connections that we build. And when you think of super focus and special interest, it's like building those like little, areas of interest that you dig deep in. And then you have all these little connections there. And I know when I have 3 children who are prodigies, they built in like their one little area. It was like, holy cow, you're really, really good at this. It just comes up. It's natural. And like my sister was with music, it was driven by her sensitivity. It was driven by her highest sensing. So we have these natural inclinations, every single one of us, where we're going to build like these little areas that are really clustered. And then we're going to build another one. We're going to build another one. Kim built his all in a couple really strong areas. Like he could memorize whole books, just a single read. He could count cards before they hit the floor. But they're,
Your son?
No, Kim Peek. He's the Rain Man.
You mean the Rain
not my
Man.
son. My son had a thing. But the bigger picture ones are the ones the bigger picture savants you're not seeing because they aren't showing it as children, or like, it's not like a trick. It's like literally like, hey, I'm going to introduce a new cognition. It's bigger stuff. So it takes more knowledge. It takes longer time for us to come to fruition. We probably would have come to fruition earlier if I wasn't undone for 20 years in the school system, but I'm not really sure. I mean, I really don't know. If you look at Beethoven and Mozart, those guys were music savants, but were they amazing performers? No. And everything in our system is about performance. It's about producing. It's about showing it. If you're a theorist, if you're a big picture savant, you're not going to show that. It's going to be in your head, and you're going to be so sensitive that you don't want to perform, that's too much, that constantly being on for others undoes your wanting to be great at things.
Yeah. And what do you think would happen to these young kids if they're not feeling like they're understood, or don't have the way to express themselves or understand themselves? What would happen?
It's devastating. It's horrible. I was so depressed as a child. I made it about other people. I lived for other people. I was the extreme egoist. It's still hard for me not to be, because I am an emotion savant. I feel other people more than I feel myself. My emotions come up and resolve and have fact. Other people's emotions hang out in my body, unless they're really big. But I had so much rejection as a kid. I had so much being told that something was wrong with me all the time. I saw kids like me commit suicide. I didn't see it in person, but I saw them at school and then they weren't there. And it was devastating because you're being told that you shouldn't be here, that there's no place for you, that you don't have a path, and you know it, and you're able to actually cognitively see that, like your brain saying, I don't see a path, and you're lost. My son has really close friends who are just like him, and they're living in their parents' basement. They're depressed. They're on all these medicines, and they're not living. They're in their mid-20s, and they're just not getting up and being alive. And I see more and more kids going that way, and it makes me want to cry, like deeply, profoundly.
Yeah. I have a few young family members like that, and literally exactly like you said, in their 20s, living in the basement of the parents, and super gifted. And what kind of program do you have at Gifted ND to support this young adults and even older adults?
It's each an individual program because each person's defined by their sensitivities, but it's the same thing each time. They have to create their own path. The world is society, it's breaking. These kids are the ones that are forced out first so that they can create their own path. They have to learn how they move through the world. Like I said before, knowing yourself, when you know yourself that well, you become the constant, and the rest can change, but you know you, and you can chart. It's no different than navigating as a sailor, except for you're the vessel. We have taught people how to fit into boxes. We haven't taught them how to be who they actually are or who they need to be. We're just the first ones because we're the most sensitive. Everybody's going to move over. So those kids are lost first, and we blamed them. And when I was younger, my parents were so sure that I was going to end up just a complete and utter, worthless piece of whatever. Mm-hmm. And they didn't invest in me. They kind of threw me out as soon as I turned 18, and everybody was like, oh, her. But then I ended up being the most successful one, and they were like, oh. And that's the thing, is it is our creative children who we're throwing out right now, and they're the ones who have the most potential. They're the ones that are going to be most successful if they can get in front of it. It is not love to be chucked out of the house as soon as you can be. It is not love to be uncultivated and told that you need to fix yourself. That's not love. Love is unconditional. Love is profound. Love, it builds you up. It lets you fall and fail and fix and create. Creating is failing. That's what it is. Why are we not teaching children this? This is the future. And yet we're still grading. We're still making regurgitate. And we're still telling them there's something wrong with them and medicating them into the ground.
Yeah, there's a lot to be fixed in our society. And for people who are listening, who need your help and who want your help, where can they find you? I'm on www.giftednd.com. It's GIFTEDND.com. I offer a multitude of different ways, but I offer savant circles, which is literally a path building process. Mm-hmm. You can come, be in a group of people like you build a family, you produce, you market for each other, you each have a different talent, because I don't put more than one talent in each kind. But the goal is to build a family. We don't need to be taught what we need. We can learn automatically. That's actually what the gift is for. Mm-hmm. What we actually need to learn is the weakest parts. I learned English, writing, all that stuff without ever learning it in the school. I went to college for math and computers. I was told I was bad at math and computers. Turns out I wasn't bad at math and computers. I just needed context. But by being with people like me, being with people who needed context and told me stories that went on and on and on and on, I was like, oh my gosh, I needed that context. Mm-hmm. We are not disabled in the other area. We actually need just as deep of a context in the area that we're teaching ourselves. We're just completely untaught. We are suppressed and uncultivated. Once we get around our peers, once we see ourselves reflected in others, our emotional states improve, our communication skills improve, all of the things are a result of just oppression, of just being uncultivated. We don't get what we need. The systems are meeting average, and we're just not. We will achieve great things given the right space. Mm-hmm. It's the orchid and the dandelion. There's a book done by, I think, a Dr. Boyd, and he talked about himself and his sister was really sensitive, and she ended up dying young, and he talked about what a travesty. She was so brilliant, what happened, and yet he ended up becoming a doctor. Well, what happened was his sister was an outlier, slightly more than him. She couldn't fit into the system, and it broke her.
And that's what happens. We kill our geniuses. We destroy them. Even the most successful ones die in chronic pain. They're alcoholics. I mean, why are we making that romanticized? That's disgusting. It's not okay. It's horrible. The most sensitive people deserve to be honored, taken care of, loved. I mean, why would you do that to the most sensitive people?
Repeat that again, because I really got hung up on your word when you explain what love is. Love is
Unconditional.
Unconditional. And
love is unconditional. It's cultivation. Love is accepting somebody where they're at and meeting them there.
Yeah. And we shouldn't throw our kids out when they're
No,
not
just
ready
because
yet.
they aren't fitting into the mold. The mold's breaking anyways. There was no mold. It was fake.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Lillian, for being here. It is a pleasure. I've learned so much. And like I said before, if I've said it, I must slow down this video and watch it again, because you are so like full of information, and I learned a lot. And for the audience out there, if you're watching, if you're listening, if you recognize yourself in the story, in the way that Lillian described, and if you know someone who needed this type of help, please visit Lillian's website, giftednd.com, and we'll put the link below. And until next time, continue improvement to mastery. And Dr. Sa signing off, Mastery Podcast. See you in the next episode. Bye for now.